Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us make better choices, more clearly see both sides of complex issues, and better navigate the challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I would like to invite, and I've already invited them, I would like to welcome my guests for today. Mark Brown is a world champion speaker, an executive coach, and an artificial intelligence software advisor. Deb Coviello, aka the Drop-In CEO, is an author, speaker, podcast host, and silver medalist curler who coaches C-suite leaders of today and tomorrow to navigate challenges with confidence. And Dr. Robin Odegaard is known as the mental MacGyver. He provides luxury level high performance support and coaching to executives, founders, celebrities, and athletes. He is also the creator and facilitator of the Quick Hits podcast. Thank you all for being with me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Enchanté.
And here is the scenario we'll be discussing. Last week, St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner announced that she would resign from her position amidst charges of chronic mismanagement and neglect of duty. Among other allegations, local reporters discovered that Ms. Gardner had been taking classes in a full-time nursing program during a staffing crisis in her office. In general, is it ethical to hold two full-time jobs at once? With advances in artificial intelligence, some workers claim that they can easily handle the demands of 2, 3, or even 4 jobs without compromising their performance in any of them. Is it proper for individual employees to make such an assessment themselves? Even if it's true at any particular moment, are those employees likely to relinquish one of those jobs and its paycheck if their workload increases and they have to cut corners? And even if they are getting all their work done competently, are they unethical for deceiving employers who don't know about those second or third jobs? Or if they are doing all the work they're being paid to do, is the remaining time of the day theirs to do with as they please? Is using unallotted time for another job any different from playing Candy Crush or surfing TikTok? The floor is open.
So I would like to just get started and just ask a broader question. When we think about employment, what are the standards for unethical behavior? Again, we are in service to our employer. We do the work that we are contracted or we sign on the dotted line for. Who's to say what external activity becomes unethical when we are in service to our employers and do the work that's needed? So I am very curious from the others, where does then the line of not being ethical come into play? We need to be forthcoming, but do we have to tell them everything about what we're doing on the side?
Well, I will say this. Over the last several years, there has been a phrase that has become very popular. The phrase is the side hustle. And everyone says, who can a side hustle? It can become your main gig. So the concept of additional employment, additional enterprise, and entrepreneurship has become very popular and I dare say commonplace, certainly in North America over the last dozen or so years and more, which may not answer Deb's question regarding what is ethical. But I also can think of those individuals since post-pandemic who are finding ways and trying to find ways to supplement their income to provide for their families because the last several years have been difficult. So the issue is not merely one of morality. I shouldn't say merely. It's not solely one of what's morally correct. But we must also consider the reasons why individuals will make these choices, which may in some cases be simply one of survival, because not every job can supply all the needs of an individual. So the second job, the side hustle, has become very commonplace. Are we now questioning the morality of what has become commonplace?
Well, and also, those of us of a certain age may remember the term moonlighting for taking a second job. If I take a second job and I don't get enough sleep, and now I'm not completely alert on my main job, is that a different dynamic, or is that just another manifestation of the same thing? What do you say, Dr. Robin?
Well, so the way I was kind of thinking about this is that if you're paying me by the hour, then you're paying me for anything that I can output in that hour. You're paying me for my time. But if I'm salaried or I'm being paid for the project, then you're paying me to get the work done. And when I get it done, how I get it done, and what I'm doing in between getting that done shouldn't matter really, right?
Yeah,
I've
I
been
mean,
told that in Facebook, not that I'm a fan particularly, but I've been told that the campus is really a campus. I mean, they have arcades and all kinds of activities and nap rooms. And a visitor said, "When does work get done?" And the tour guide said, "Well, you have work to do, and if you get your work done, we don't care when you get it done or what you're doing the rest of the time. And if you're not getting it done, you're getting fired." So to your point, Dr. Robin, it's it's the work more than the pay. But even if it is by the hour, what happens if I still have hours on my clock, but I don't have work to fill those hours? Is
Mhm.
that any different?
Well, and if I'm
Yep.
answering the phone, like if my job is to answer the phone and I have to be available to answer the phone, if the phone's not ringing, what I do otherwise, who cares as long as I answer the phone if it rings?
but another thing I'm just going to throw more things into the thing is what if you are working in such an industry that working for another entity or company that potentially can compete? Might that enter into the ethical conversation? And maybe it is or is not in writing when you signed on with the primary company. Is that unethical to maybe work for a competitor, even if it maybe is not delineated when you sign on with that company?
That to
You end
me,
up with a conflict of interest. Sorry,
Yeah.
Mark.
please continue, Dr. Robin.
I made the point. You end up with a conflict of interest, and then who do you choose?
Hmm. And of course, the other piece, and you know this very well, Deb, is the infamous non-compete clause that is often included in employment agreements and at times in separation agreements. Even after you leave the company, there is a 2, 3, 4, 5-year non-compete clause. You break that, then clearly you are in violation. But the ethical challenge that Rabbi Jonathan has raised, he touched on, we didn't really deliberate on, was the idea of what if the second job, the side hustle, is causing me to lose sleep, lose my edge, and my performance diminishes. That's clearly a performance issue, but as an individual, I have to examine my responsibility and my ability to fulfill that responsibility in a case where the second job is clearly impinging upon my ability to perform my duties. I have personally, morally, I think if I cannot do both, I must then relinquish the second and fulfill my responsibilities to the person I committed to in the first place. Most side hustles are generally entrepreneurship, generally now in the last 4 or 5 years, but one has to consider what is the responsibility? How can I best provide the service I am contracted or I have agreed to provide? And if I'm sleeping on the job, that's clearly an issue.
But does it go ahead? Yeah.
I was just going to say, to that point, it doesn't really matter at that point whether I'm taking a second job or spending the night drinking out of the bars. I do have a responsibility to live my life in a way that allows me to discharge the duties for which I'm being paid.
We
Go
see
ahead,
that
Deb.
with professional athletes, right? If they're out at night partying, carrying on, whatever, and they're not able to show up to practice or games ready to play, then they're not doing their job.
Right.
But let me ask the question again. Is it more about ethics or is it about just good decision logic and how we manage ourselves? Because at the end of the day, is it an ethical violation or agreement that I have with the company? Or is it just being a responsible individual to make the right decisions for balance and for those people that I'm in service to?
And I think we've fallen into the conversation of I'm not doing both of them well. And I think what we're seeing at least what I'm seeing out there is that people are successfully doing both of them well. It's working.
Mhm.
So if it's working, then it comes back to, is it ethical? And to Deb, to your point, is it okay? Is it its service to the company?
Now you just spawned a thought that I had, though. What is not ethical or not appropriate is while you're on the job with one, start to talk about the other and vice versa. That starts crossing the line, for which that's being less responsible, less ethical. You're here now, be present. When you're there, be present. Don't cross the lines.
And that's a really, really interesting ethical point, is that even in the best case scenario, where I am not compromising my performance, but nevertheless, if I've created a situation where I may be susceptible to crossing lines inadvertently, is that itself unethical?
Well, so here's an interesting situation. I interact with my clients via text. I have more than one client. There is always the risk that I will respond to the wrong client in a text stream. Is that unethical then for me to have multiple clients? No, I just have to pay attention to the text string that I'm in and have them be different colors and they have different ringtones and keep them separate. So no, I don't think the risk in and of itself makes it wrong.
But you are a contractor, which by definition means you're going to have multiple clients,
Right.
as opposed to somebody who's working a 9 to 5, where there is a presumption that I'm fully present for that one job during those working hours.
But that assumes that you know what working hours are.
Mm.
Because if you work for a global company, you may work for one company. Maybe I'm on a call at 3 a.m. for that company. Well, then do they expect me to also work 9 to 5?
At that point, Dr. Robin, I chuckle because several days ago, with the advent of ChatGPT, I was reading articles on it and having discussions about it. And there was one particular article where they were examining how it's being used. And they happened to poll a group of individuals who are somewhat like contractors. And they write documents, they write emails, and they were extolling the virtue of ChatGPT doing it for them, thereby enabling them to have 2, 3, sometimes 4. You've seen the article.
I did see that
Yes.
article.
So they have 4 different jobs, but they have an intern, an artificial intelligence intern, doing the writing for them. They'll check a few things and send them off. And they say they're very comfortable and competent to serve in these 3 and sometimes 4 jobs. Does AI in itself create somewhat of an ethical dilemma in that, are you writing your words or are you having someone else write the words with your name attached thereto?
But is that any different than
Yeah.
if you hire a big graphic design marketing firm and they have people, or they offshore it or something and then turn it over to you after they've proofread it?
This is a good question.
And I don't want to throw in a question as well. I mean, we're going by the paradigm of single employment. And if we take on another side gig, then it's becomes an ethical dilemma, potentially. Might we flip the mindset that we are in a gig economy? People will have multiple jobs to serve their personal, business, financial interests, for which then maybe it is no longer the standard for which we have to decide, is it unethical because we're going by an old business model?
I think that's a really astute point. There's certain presumptions of reasonable expectation. And I think there certainly was a time when the expectation was, I've hired you for a certain time and I expect you to be there and fully present. But between remote work and all these various tools we have, maybe that just doesn't apply anymore.
Much has to be rethought in the new economy, in the new world. And with artificial intelligence becoming so prominent so rapidly, perhaps we have to rethink many of these standards. We all know, you go back 40, 50 years ago, it was you work at a company for 35 years, you get the gold watch and you retire. And that no longer exists. So that model no longer exists. And now I can do more. I have a virtual assistant to help me to write my speeches, to do my papers. And now students are saying, can I do my homework with ChatGPT? I don't want to digress, but ChatGPT in itself could pose some ethical issues depending on its application. Again, I don't want to go down that road, but standards certainly have changed. I have to agree with that. And you asked earlier, Dr. Robin, about what are the working hours? We don't know what the hours are, particularly there's no physical office anymore. I have 3 adult children, one of whom is my daughter is 39, is a senior attorney in the Social Security Administration in Falls Church, Virginia. And she told me a couple of days ago, they got notified until further notice, you continue to work at home. And she plans her morning Orange Theory fitness classes, and she schedules herself in with her duties and her coaching and her trainings she has to do. And she logs her hours when she's at the computer. And I'm thankful she feels no ethical dilemma to do anything else. But I realized she was told, you're going to be home until further notice. That understanding alone could lend itself to the idea of, hey, I can do something more. I can do something else. The issue then becomes, what are your working hours at home when the children and the pets and the delivery and the repair person comes in? Do you compensate for time spent? Oh, to fix my dryer, half an hour. Or do we let it slide?
Yeah.
I'm gonna work until 7 tonight. I'll just, I'm not really clocking in, because how many employees who are virtual do have to sign a time card? I'm not so sure. So the ethical issue gets muddied by the variables and the gray areas, pun intended, and the lines that have been shifting over the last several years. What say you?
It is interesting to hear you say that about your daughter, Mark, because my son works for JP Morgan, and there's very little he does that he can't do from home. But the CEO, Jamie Dimon, has decreed that he wants people coming in more. He feels that they're more efficient at work, and that there's a certain company culture he wants to preserve. So it really is going to change from job to job and over time.
There is, I think, another piece to this puzzle, and that is, what hardware are you working on? Did your company give you the computer? Is it your personal computer? Are you doing work on a computer from company A for company B? Because I saw a thing recently where someone worked on their side hustle at night on their computer that was given to them by the company. And when they quit the company was like, you did that work on a company computer. We own it.
Agree.
Good point. Yes.
No, definitely agree with that. But then the next thing is that, let's just say a company does not appreciate somebody having a side hustle and seeing it negatively impact. Do they potentially discharge or address it from an ethical perspective, or is it simply being able to perform the duties? Again, it's an interesting topic you bring up about ethics. From a personal perspective, we have that ethical dilemma, but is it from a company perspective? Are we addressing it from an ethical perspective, or simply we just want to maintain the certain standard of work? So
part of that has to be, how good of an employee is it? And again, I'm going to go back to sports teams just because it's easy.
yeah,
You see sports teams keep athletes that are really, really good athletes on the field, and they're horrible in the locker room. I don't recommend it, but you see it happen. I've also seen it in the corporate space. Well, you keep people who produce, but they're horrible humans. So I think it depends
yes.
how good of an employee, how much of a producer are they, and how much are you willing to tolerate from them, and what precedent does that set?
And of course, this all plays into company culture and the trust that employers and employees have for each other and earn from each other. Because if I feel that my employer is reasonable, treats me fairly, recognizes what I'm contributing, then I'm going to be more inclined to fall in line with whatever demands they place on me. Whereas if I feel I'm taking advantage, I mean, you mentioned being on the phone at 3 a.m. I mean, the 9 to 5 model has disappeared from a lot of places. And there is this idea of employees who feel that they're 24/7, they're expected to be on call. That does not breed loyalty and job satisfaction.
If you want to flip that, is that ethical on the side of the company?
Well, yeah, exactly. And then if I feel that I'm not being treated ethically, then my own standards of ethics towards my employer are going to slip dramatically, because it's just a tit for tat.
Well, in France, they're not allowed to work outside business hours. Like they're very regimented. These are your work hours. And what they're finding is that it doesn't allow for work flexibility where I need to go pick up my kid to take her to a doctor's office. Well, that's in the middle of the workday, too bad. Whereas here in the US, you would work, you take your kid, and then you just work late. But what happens with that, though, is that American workers are expected to flex to meet the work hours of other countries. And I have a sister who spends a lot of time on calls at middle of the night because she's the one that has the flexibility to flex.
My son-in-law and daughter moved from New York to LA, and he stayed in his job for a while. And he was working remotely New York hours in LA, which meant he was up way before dawn.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why he left.
But
Because it just was not conducive to having a life.
you mentioned earlier, Rabbi, you used the phrase "my own standard of ethics." I wrote it down. And that in itself could be problematic, because if we each have our own standard of ethics and they're not congruent, it could be an issue. For example, I could be that high performance worker and I think, hey, they need me. They're not going to fire me. I'm the best. I'm the heavy hitter. I'm bringing in 10 million a year in this job. They're not going to fire me. So I'll come in, I do what I want. I'm going to produce. I'm going to work a 15-hour work week for all I care. But the attitude can be pervasive because those who perform well are admired and at times emulated. So ethically, do I, with my attitude, do my company and my associates a disservice by flaunting that attitude and doing what I want based upon my own standard of ethics?
Well, again, it speaks to culture, but also conversation. I think it's important that if somebody is being seen, an employee of, yes, they may be a high performer, but they are negatively impacting the culture around them, it's on the responsibility of the company to have those conversations to help me to understand, reset the expectation, maybe dig a little bit deeper. Maybe there's a little bit of a misunderstanding, maybe set the tone of, I expect you to do X, Y, and Z, because if a company then just decides to dismiss somebody because they were unethical, not positive for the culture, it should take some steps. We should be having more conversations with our people to make sure that people understand the standards culturally, professionally, et cetera. So you bring up a really good point.
I'm wondering so in the 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't uncommon for executives to go play golf in the afternoon, or like they would go and do whatever. I'm salary, I do my job, I do what I want.
Martini lunch.
Right, exactly. And now we've got a situation where pretty much everyone can do that. We're work from home, we'd work when we want to. And now all of a sudden everybody's up in arms about it. And it's not just I have a second job, it's I do my laundry in the middle of the day. Are we having a double standard for what executives have always done versus what in the trenches people are allowed to do?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
No.
May I comment on that? Because I'm chuckling because I remember when I was working for a company, a well-known company in New York back in the early to mid 1990s. They created a job for me whereby I would travel across the country and give presentations in middle and high schools. I had left my previous job as a mainframe computer programmer analyst. And I remember calling my manager one day, say, hey, listen, Bill, I'm not going to be in office this week on Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going to be doing so-and-so. I'm traveling the week after next to schools. We're building that particular part of the business. And I can't be sure. He said, stop, Mark, stop. You go to the schools, you travel, you do your work, you come back. I don't care.
Exactly.
I was so fixated on you do the 8 hours at the desk. When you don't, you tell them what you're doing. But they shifted my responsibility. I was traveling more. Eventually, I was traveling over 100 days a year. And I was said, look, just work from home, which in 1999 for me was a huge thing. I've not been in an office since 98. I got a job in August of 98, and I've not had an office job since 1998. It's 27 years. My math is incorrect. 25 years. But the thought is, I could not wrap my brain around the idea of not telling my boss how I accounted for my time. Again, that was in the previous millennium. Things certainly have changed. So perhaps what Deb is saying is correct. Perhaps we should revisit culturally what should the standards be? We should delineate clearly what the ethical requirements are going to be and hold everyone to a standard that supports the culture of the company. And I find that idea very refreshing to look at the culture there, because now culture varies from company to company and from industry to industry, and individuals may have their own standard of ethics that may have to come in line with what.
That does speak to your question, Mark, about the flexibility of ethics or variability of ethics, because I mean, that's why we have to grapple with the gray. It's not that ethical principles change, but the application to situations does change. And that's going to vary from individuals and workplaces. And, you know, the word transparency has become such a cliche, but, you know, cliches become cliches because they're true. When you have a culture where people working in the place understand why decisions are made, they may not agree with them, but if they can recognize there's a process and there's a clarity, then they may be willing to say, okay, this isn't the way I would like it, but at least I appreciate how it is and why it is, and I can live with it. It's where there's that sense that things are hidden, things aren't fair, things aren't consistent, things aren't well communicated. That's when people start to feel taken advantage of and lose the desire to hold themselves to a higher standard of ethics.
I love what you
Mark,
said about, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Deb. No, you, Deb.
What you
go.
said about the application of the ethics to the actual situation. So let's just take something that hasn't actually happened yet. But we have child labor laws for which we cannot hire people under a certain age. But what happens with, again, GPT, highly talented individuals, they graduate college at 12, 13, 14 years old. They are ready to make an impact in the world and join the workforce. Is it unethical to hire somebody that's got maybe a master's degree at the age of 15 into a corporate level role? They have child labor laws, but the person's ready to produce. People will start making exceptions and hiring them in. But then is that ethical because we have child labor laws? So we have to be ready for the next change in our culture.
You actually remind me, Deb, that when I was in college, the guy across the hall from me in the dorms, he was a computer whiz. It's 19 years old. And he was hired by a company to come in and play around, just do whatever he wanted to do. And he was getting paid $15 an hour, which in the 70s was
Big money.
really nice for a college kid. But anything that he might have invented would have become the property of his employer. Now, I don't know whether at 19 he had a full appreciation of what that might mean. He also might never have had the opportunity to play the games he was playing without the equipment that's being provided for him. So you get into two sides of the ethics issue with that also.
Mark, you made a good point though when you were speaking a minute ago, because you used a word, you said everyone. And if you're going to have a culture and you're going to make these kind of mandates, it has to apply to everyone. And I can guarantee you that executives are not going to want to be part of that everyone.
I remember when I first worked for a company where the the VP for the mortgage department would go and have golf on Wednesday and play golf on Wednesdays. My brain couldn't understand, but isn't he supposed to be playing at work? He's playing golf every Wednesday. That's what he does. Yeah. They could delegate responsibilities and say, I'm doing my job. We're going to get to report to the XCOM. They go to the XCOM meeting. We're covered. You're good. You're playing golf. You're doing it. We don't care. You're doing your job. And that was fine.
Exactly.
But I also thought of the 15-year-old who was employed to do something significant, something maybe groundbreaking. I wonder though, and this may not be an ethical question, but with their level of maturity as a 15-year-old, having access to potentially sensitive information based upon their technical expertise, is it ethical for me as an employer to put someone with that level of maturity into that position solely for the purpose of taking advantage of their expertise? That to me was also an ethical question.
And it's dangerous because if your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, which is not till you hit your mid-20s, you don't have the impetus control, the control to be able to say, that's not a good idea. I shouldn't do that. Because your emotional brain is what's running the show.
Cool, I get to work, I get to play. Oh, fun. Yes. But am I being ethical as an employer in that circumstance? I'm not so sure.
Good point.
Well, this has been engaging, stimulating, thoughtful.
I don't think we answered the question, Jonas.
Well, we don't always look for answers. We look to frame the issue better. If you have any perspectives you'd like to advocate, this would be the time to do it.
Go for it, Dr. Robin. Go for it.
No, Deb came in with a really
Okay, I'll
strong
go first.
opinion.
I'll
She
go
has to
first.
first.
I always have something to say. I don't, my opinion, again, I still can't change it. I don't think it's unethical that one chooses to do something that they value, that may contribute, that may serve a purpose. They may have a job that fulfills a financial responsibility, that finds another pursuit which fulfills their passion and maybe a life's purpose if they're not getting it elsewhere. Who's to dictate what they can and cannot do as long as they do perform? If an employer wants to part ways, it may be based on performance, but then even at that point, they should be having constant conversations about what that looks like. But I think we still need to redefine what work looks like and evolve our standards.
I fully believe that if I can fulfill my role and what you expect of me and get it done within the parameters of what I consider my work hours and do other things, then I should be allowed to do that. I don't think I should work for a competing company. I think that's just bad judgment and not ethical. But if I'm working for two very separate companies and you're both very happy with the work that I'm outputting, I just don't see it being an issue. I don't think I'd lie about it. I would like to be able to put both of you on my LinkedIn profile. I'm doing both of these things. You're both happy. Yay.
And the issue becomes a bit more touchy when one of the two employers may not be amenable to being to you or I.
Exactly.
Working for two other people. I will confess, for me, I had a full-time job in the IT industry, and on weekends I would officiate soccer games at IBM in New York, outside of White Plains, and that was a way for me to be able to get some more money as a sole breadwinner, wife and two children. That to me was important. And I never made, and irony was I was also on call at times for IT, getting calls at 2 a.m. But I would always make every effort to separate the two. Different industries, different activities. But I realized for me, it was important for my income to be supplemented. I agree, we should be very careful about conflicts of interest. And I do have concerns about the individuals who have 3 and 4 jobs with ChatGPT to help them in similar industries. That I think may be ethically problematic.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up, Mark. I was thinking at the time that I just had my editor at Fast Company turn down an article I submitted for my column on that exact subject for the reason that she said they have so many of these articles in right now. She just didn't have room for another one. So it certainly is a relevant topic. And
is that any different than outsourcing? And is that okay? I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, to the point that just raised, I think ideally, if everyone's above board about it, then there's certainly no ethical issue. It's when the employee hides it or feels that they have to hide it. Because they can't expect a reasonable accommodation from their boss. And that's when I think there is a corrosive influence on the work culture and on individual ethics. If we have to be sneaking around, something's wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
Even if we're not actually doing anything wrong, it's just not a healthy state of affairs.
And I do know someone who got fired when she put her side hustle on her LinkedIn profile.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So it became full-time really quick, even though she didn't mean for it to.
I hope she's doing well.
She seems to be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes we need to be pushed before we go all in. All right. Well, thank you all. Mark Brown, Deb Coviello, and Dr. Robin Odegaard. As always, stimulating, thoughtful discussion, and there's always more that we could say. For those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to jonasandgoldson.com, use the contact information, submit it, and if it's compelling, we'll definitely use it for a future episode. And until next time, continue grappling with the gray.